Hello, it's just so good to be back in a proper studio again, and we've got a proper guest and all to launch this rerun of this show that originally began way back just over 7 years ago in September 2014, and the guest that we had then is the guest that we have tonight, although for the past 20 months you've had to make do with me peering into an iPhone propped up on a stepladder on my kitchen table on Zoom. Now, you didn't see that part of it, but thanks to the miraculous Greg next door, we managed to keep this show going. But it is so good to be back in a proper studio again. As I say, with a proper guest. I'm talking Andy Pack there.
And TC.
Andy Pack, the ghostwriter, if you'll accept that term, of the great Tony Currie's long-awaited, dare I say belated, autobiography.
Well, first of all, it's not a ghost book, so I don't know why you said ghostwriter. I'm only kidding, Alan. Yeah, well, Sistine Chapel wasn't a quick job either.
I'm sure this wasn't. It's taken him a load of time to get round to it. We'll sort of ask him that in a minute. Tony, you're always welcome here. You know your way to this studio, almost blindfolded. You've got here again tonight. Fantastic. Good to see you. All these interviews, though, how many do you reckon so far?
About the book?
Yeah.
Thank God, I thought you meant the career.
To keep count of those.
Yeah.
Loads.
5 or 6 in the papers, in the nationals, yeah.
Interviewed to death.
Yeah, it's been quite stressful actually, but it's obviously been worthwhile.
That's the price of writing a book. So, Andy, not often, it's not a rare interview for Tony, but authors, well, you won't accept ghost writer. Can I say co-author? Co-authors don't usually get interviewed. I mean, I've written a couple with personalities, and I never got interviewed about those. So you can consider yourself privileged here to know.
I probably pushed myself too much then if I've got on those pretenses. Never
No,
mind.
but it starts. Who did this start? Before we get into the content. And by the way, it's here. There we are, hot off the presses. It's only, I think, been only printed in the last couple of days or so. Imperfect 10, Tony Currie's autobiography. Did the process start with Tony ringing you saying, "What about? It's about time I wrote a book," or did it start with you?
No, it started with me probably asking Tony, as I'm sure lots of other people, aspiring authors or even eminent authors, may well have wanted to chance their arm with that for a long, long time. I don't pride myself that I was sort of first choice, but I was the one who was pushing at the time when he decided that it was the occasion to put his name to a book. It obviously had in the past 1 or 2 stabs at biographies of him, but they weren't really telling his story more than anybody would already know. And I'm not criticising the gentleman who did the biography, but that wasn't compiled with any sort of cooperation with Tony for him to say what he wanted to say. So, as you know, I'd done Keith Edwards' autobiography, and that came out in 2014. It was probably around then that Keith and I started talking to Tony and saying, do it. I don't think Tony was particularly bothered at that time, for whatever reason. But then he changed his mind. Something must have changed for him when the time was right. And
Right. So what was it, Tony, that changed your mind?
Probably old age, really. Getting on a bit, and you know, yeah. The other 2 that came out, what were they? Matador and whatever the other one was, and they were very similar books by the same author, and I really had nothing to do with them, really. And
did you read it with some frustration, thinking, well, I wouldn't have said that about me, or don't think that's come over very well, or were you flattered to read them?
Well, I got through the first. I got halfway through the first one and got fed up. So
Fed up by what?
No, I'm kidding. They were all from articles in the paper, in soccer magazines, etc., etc. You know, perhaps interviews on the telly and things like that. So I don't know. I'm not saying none of it wasn't true, what was said, but I just thought, I just thought in the end, 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was, Andy, wasn't it? And let's do one.
Why the reluctance? Because, players have barely taken off their boots these days before a book comes out, and it could be the first of several. You're now a few years older than me. I won't give your exact age.
I don't mind.
You've decided now is the time. You say old age, but you could have had about 10 books out by now. You've been so reluctant. Why?
Well, I'm a manana man, I suppose.
Yeah, put it off.
Do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
My wife's do it yesterday, and I'm manana man, and so I suppose I've just been putting it off for years and years and years.
Yeah.
It was like the management thing when I'd packed in playing, and I was out of the game for 4 or 5 years, 6 years I think, and trying to get back get back into football then was virtually impossible for me, and and I'd left it too late.
Would you
really.
like to have been a manager?
Not. Yes, sorry. I was going to say. I sound like him out. What was that?
Yeah. No. Who is that?
Vicar of Dibley.
Yeah, Vicar of Dibley. Yeah.
yes. No. Yeah. I'd have wanted to be a manager. I remember Terry Venables saying, you've got to go into coaching. You'd be a great coach. Blah blah blah. And I thought, I want to be the manager. I want to be the one that picks the team. I want to be responsible. I want to, this and that. So, but like I said, manana man doesn't do it. He puts it off, and that's what I did. But I wasn't in a great way in, the early to mid '80s, and my head was all over the place.
I think people knew that you weren't in a good place, but they didn't realise the depths of that, and this, the great light and the great shade of your life. This is, Andy, what you have been able to reveal and sort of encourage Tony to talk about. Was that difficult to get him to do that? And have you discovered things about, you've known Tony for a long time, that you didn't know previously?
That dichotomy in his character is the book for me, and if anybody's wondering about the title, well, first of all, it's not I'm Perfect 10, it's Imperfect 10, which for me sort of summed up what we're really talking about here about Tony. It is not a book about every goal he scored, every goal he missed, everything he created, what he had for pre-match meal. Yes, that's in, but it is literally a autobiography, as in a life story, which of course means that you're not going to be dwelling on just the 300 or 490 minutes that he had on a football pitch. And for me, and I suppose that sounds a little bit selfish, that's what I would want to read about a well-known sportsman, because you basically know what he did in the 90 minutes on the field. It's what motivated him, what demotivated him, and particularly in Tony's case, because I do feel, and he won't mind me saying, there is such a vast difference between the iconic showman on the pitch, in virtually all forms of his personality, to the guy who's lived his life off the pitch. And I'll tell you, it has been a bit of a struggle at times. It's not for me to say, but...
What's been the struggle from your perspective before I come to Tony?
The struggle for me has been, well, I'd start this process, maybe you have as well, with the people you've written books for, by saying, what's the story you want to tell? Do you think it will be interesting? And are there large elements that you do not want to tell? And you have to respect that. I think there could be virtually nobody alive who would want to tell everybody everything about your life, because nobody's perfect. I wasn't prepared for just how bare he would lay himself in that book.
Yeah.
And I've repeatedly asked him during the course of it, do you want to say that? Let's just think, do you want to say, because this will happen? this will be picked up on.
Tony, have you surprised yourself how much you, in Andy's words, have laid yourself bare in the book?
Not really. He's easy to speak to, and when we talked a lot, and things just came out, and you know, going through each year of my life and remembering almost all that I could remember. No, it was okay, but yeah, difficult. But
I mean, there's such a contrast, isn't there, between the brilliance of your career and the fantastic goals, the fact that you were a showman, you know, with the hair, flowing hair, and the shirt outside, the shorts. Nobody could quite imagine that underneath that there was a, you know, even when you were playing, perhaps there was a very unhappy soul. Was there, or was it following your career?
no, there was a few games where I was in where I shouldn't have played, because my head was all over the place. I.e., I can go, you know, to the semi-final for Leeds versus Southampton. I shouldn't have played that game, but I did.
Was it something going on in your life that?
Oh yeah. It was my wife, my first wife. She had depression, and I didn't really get, you know, the relationship was very stressed because she was from down south and she didn't want to live up here, and you know, I pulled her off of a train when we was only 18, before we had the kids. We had the kids early. We had 2 children before we were 21, which is what I wanted. Whether she did, I don't know. But you know, looking back, I don't remember. I don't know. But it was, we were all over the place really. She had depression after the first child in 1971, so that took care of more or less my career. Being, you know, I did a lot of looking after her and caring and things like that.
Did you realise that you perhaps were suffering from depression as well?
Oh, yeah, I just got on with it. I mean, we were brought up, you know, probably like my mum. She just got on with it. Nobody liked to go to the doctors in them days, and you know, and I just got on with it. I didn't realise. I just thought it was what everybody went through, you know.
I think that was the general attitude then. I imagine that a player in your era couldn't really talk or discuss about anything of that nature, whereas now people are much more open about it. And if you'd have been playing now, do you think that you would have maybe sought some help or talked to people?
Well, I would have thought, obviously, because that is, I mean, it's quite in the news now, isn't it? That, you know, people coming out about stress and problems and things like that, and they're obviously the players do get all the help they need from every different angle. I would imagine so. So yeah, that would be covered.
The book obviously details this. I mean, it's obviously going to be a contrasting read. You know, there are some really serious issues, and the fact that there are so many highs as well graphically illustrates how fame and money, although you didn't earn, you know, what players of your standard would today, how fame and money doesn't cut it in certain situations in people's lives.
Try explaining that to people who've not been in the public eye and been perceived to have had, by their standards, a lot of money. To them, that means, and you're playing football.
Yeah.
You can't be anything else but happy. You have a great life. You can't explain that to people until you've actually been in the situation yourself. But no, don't let us give the impression that this is a dull book and it's all filled with Tony's unfortunate times. There are all his recollections, good and bad, about being in the game as well. In fact, I would simplify it and say that Tony has been, and Mrs. Currie is sitting over there, but he's probably been at his happiest in any 90 minutes when he's been on a football pitch. And that's been the trouble. He probably loved the game and loved being involved in it to a ridiculous extent that it made life difficult off him. Speaking for you there, mate. But
no, because the highs on the field cannot be replaced off the field, can they? I mean, the way you must have felt at times.
No, I'll always remember the great Len Badger, and he always says you can't replace what we had on the pitch and what we went through as players, and just fantastic.
If you could have lived your entire life on a football field,
the buzz is unbelievable, and when you've got a team spirit that we had, that most teams probably have, you just cannot replace that in the afterlife.
No. Well, we talked the last time you came on. We talked about the famous quality goal by a quality player, and you talked us through it, and you can remember it very well, even without the pictures and John Motson's commentary. But it's unimaginable to people that you were living some kind of hell off the field. More subsequent. How low did you go? I know that we'll come off this and talk much more brightly later, but just to top and tail that aspect of it in this book here. And I haven't read it because it's literally only just come out. Thank you for the copy. How low did you get? I heard you on one interview talking about leaving a note.
Well, yeah, that was when it was all over, more or less, early 80s. In my last season on my contract, which was 82-83, just after the cup final for QPR, I only played that one game that year. And QPR got promotion to what is now the Premier League, and I only played the one game in it, and I shouldn't have played. But I told Venners, another bad decision. I told Venners I was fit, and I wasn't, and weren't even 50% fit. But I just wanted to get out there and play, and get into the season. But it didn't happen, and so. The end of that season, I went to Canada, spent a little bit of time there. Should have been 6 months contract, and it ended up I was back home within 2 months. The owner pulled the plug after one game, and then I had got divorced in '81, so I weren't living with the kids. I was living back home with my mum, and. I was in a bad way, and when I got back after Canada, I was drinking, and that's what happened. I left a note for the kids, an end it all note, and in a stupor, I suppose. And next morning, I just ripped it up and got on with it as best I could.
It's a good job that you slept on it.
Yeah,
as it were, without. Yeah. I mean, Mel Sterling came in here and, had us virtually in tears with, a slightly similar story. That again, another, supposed extrovert performer on the field who really had very, very low times in his life. But Sheffield United, of course, as will be chronicled in here, played a huge part in kind of lifting you off the floor in the mid-1980s, looking back.
Yeah, 86. I had a testimonial, which because I had not a penny, that got me back on my feet again, and I managed to.
And how happy are you in your life now? And of course, bearing in mind Mrs. Currie sitting over there, Elizabeth. I mean, do you still suffer from the depressive episodes, or are you now more content in your older age than you've been before?
Yeah, I still have bouts of stress, breathlessness and things like that now and again. Like you do hyperventilating and things like that. But, I just take that as part of the course of what I've been through over the years. But
and you can manage it and go on with your life. Yeah. Well, I'm sure Elizabeth plays a great part in that.
Oh, yes, well. Without a doubt.
He's got his script. He really has.
There has to be a price for living the dream, Alan. Let's not feel too sorry for him.
No, well, do you know, there's a counterbalance, isn't there? The highs and the lows. And I think it's, to a lesser extent, similar in what we do, what I do, I've done all my life as a reporter. You take that away from me, and I'm going to be seriously depressed. When it retires me completely, because of that adrenaline and the buzz that you get being at a football match and reporting
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
And so you can times that by about 100 million for being on a football field and scoring the sort of goals that he did. Is there a highlight of this? Sorry, carry on. You're going to say something.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Is there a high point of this book for you as the co-author, would you say?
Gosh, that's a hard one. You threw that one at me. You should have given me a week's notice for that.
I'll give you a week's notice, but not to answer the question. But
Yeah, let's just say there were some things that surprised me. I'm not trying to evade the question, and I don't want to give too much away of the book, but I couldn't believe Tony's story when he was explaining how, having gone down with United in 1976 in a team that really relegated by Christmas and had such a big fall from grace, he'd sort of resigned himself to the fact that he was going to stay at Sheffield United, and then just in the pre-season, back in what is now the Championship, he got a call to go and see the manager, which at that time was John Harris. And then I couldn't believe what unfolded in the next couple of hours with Tony virtually not saying a word and he eventually going along with it. It's your story.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean when I was we was in Gibraltar, and Jimmy Cyril was the manager. John Harris was the general manager.
Correct, sorry.
Yeah, read the book.
I got it right. Got it right in there. Just got your name wrong all the time.
Spelt it wrong.
No, and Jimmy Cyril's. I'd put 3 requests in because, try and cut a long story short. In '73, I signed a 7-year contract instead of going to Man United to replace Bobby Charlton. I was getting phone calls from the Doc and Paddy Crerand, etc. And anyway, so I signed a 7-year contract with Sheffield United, which would have took me up to 31 years of age, and that would have been my career with Sheffield United. But we had a gentleman's agreement that if we got relegated, I could leave if I wanted.
Yeah.
So that's what happened in '76. After nearly winning the league the season before, we're down by Christmas, as Andy rightly said. And then...
We've got 15 seconds left of part 1.
And
I reckon we'll leave this overhanging for part 2 as a little hook to get you back in about 3 minutes' time, when James Gregg will be here to round up all the area of sport. Andy Pack will be there, Tony Currie will be there, and with a bit of luck, I'll be here. So see you in a couple of minutes.